That's the sound of the 1951 Ford Victoria Hot Rod, fully restored and donated from the private collection of A.J. Hires. It's the 2017 Win the Classic Ford Car Raffle to support Helping Seniors of Brevard. You have to see this car. I'm Kerry Fink, and I'm inviting you to visit helpingseniors.brevard.org for full information on this exciting car raffle. That's helpingseniors.brevard.org. Stay tuned for more info on the Talk to Me radio network. We're glad that WMEL cares about the space and Treasure Coast.
The views expressed on the following program are those of the hosts, callers, and guests, and are not necessarily those of WMEL staff, management, or advertisers.
This is Jeff Steckler, folks, your host for Helping Seniors, a radio arm of Helping Seniors of Brevard County. I generally introduce the show, I talk about our sponsors, and I'll do that. But first, I even say a thing about it. I want to compliment John Harper and his staff, and especially the engineer, John O'Hara, who has worked so hard since Irma hit here. A couple of the towers went down, folks, and that's why the station's off the air for the time it was. It was really officially back on the air yesterday. And so this is the first time my show has been on since the storm. Of course, we missed because of the storm. But, you know, there's a lot of work that goes into making things happen, and you just don't think about it. But when you have two big radio towers go down out of three, and you know all the other damage, and you can't get the towers back up, and then when you have people like John O'Hara that can will work with John and the other engineers to get this thing back up and running, it's just a testimonial to what people can accomplish when they put their mind to it. And I believe that holds true in so many walks of life, that if you put your mind to something, you can make it happen. If you don't put your mind to it, if you don't worry about it, if you don't work at it, it's not going to happen. So it's one of the reasons why I'm really pleased to have one of our newest sponsors here in the showroom with me today. But before I get to him, I just want to mention just a couple of our sponsors. The Eye Institute has been one of our longest-term sponsors. Dr. Lee Sheldon, Bill Johnson, elder law attorney. Bill's been with me for almost 12 years. That's a long time. And he's just a super elder law attorney. Brevard Chiropractic and Marketing Street Memory Care are a couple of the others, as well as Helping Seniors, a home care outfit that, quite frankly, is affordable. It can help you do what you need to do. Now, with me in the panel, in the booth today is, of course, our executive director, Kerry Fink, and I promised to let Kerry talk today. I just want to say a couple of things. But our newest sponsor is August H. Velten. I asked him if he wanted to go by Gus or Augie, or he said no, August. But he was born in September, and he said, well, if he'd have been born in October, he could have named him November. But when I talk about August, I'm not talking about the month August. I'm talking about August the person, and August the person is August H. Velten and Associates. And he is, I like to think of August as a financial planner of a certain type. But he's going to tell you what he does and why his business is different. And with so many senior citizens, and when we talk about senior citizens, we talk about the 55-year-old group. These are prime candidates for what August does in his business. So you need to think about it, and I will give you an honest answer. I never thought about what August is going to talk about because I didn't know enough to think about asking the questions that August is going to do. August, so how about just telling people what your business is, what you do, and what you would like for them to know before we get some specific questions?
Sure, Joe. First of all, I'm very pleased to be here, and hopefully anything that I discuss on the air here will be information that the listeners can actually use and get some benefit out of. But I've been in the business a long time. I shouldn't even tell you this, but it's 43 years. And over that time, I've dealt with different types of demographic age groups, etc. Early on, I was involved mostly with self-employment people, telling them or showing them what they should be doing by way of protecting their business, planning for retirement, how they should be treating their employees, etc. But I've gravitated now towards more of the senior market, and to try and get people. I teach classes, FIT, Government Center, a few other places, on Social Security and something we call ABC planning, which is basically how to structure assets going into retirement. And just give you an example of what I'm saying here. When you're employed and you have a 401k, let's say, or you're putting it into an IRA, you're putting in basically the same dollar amounts over time. And that's called dollar cost averaging. In other words, whether the market's going up or down, you're putting the same amount in. And that's beneficial over time inside a 401k because it evens out the volatility somewhat. Sure, if the market's going up, your balance sheet's going up, but what you're buying with those same dollars, they're buying less and less units because the units are becoming more expensive. However, when the market's going down, your statement probably looks like it's going down or is going down, but you're buying cheaper and cheaper units. And the secret was that the reason the 401k worked over time while you were working is because when the cycle of the market turned around, those units that you bought, and you bought more units, are all there to become more valuable as the market goes back up. However, when you retire, you no longer have a 401k possibility. You don't have money coming out of your payroll, a certain amount every payday. So you've gone from contributing and accumulating to preservation and distribution. And that's two different universes. So people that come to see me in my practice are looking for answers, and they're looking for answers for Social Security. How do I position my Social Security along with my other assets? How do I protect my money? And the biggest question these days, because of longevity, is can I protect my money? Can I have the income I need for as long as I live? So that's basically where I'm at this point.
Okay. How about shooting a hole in my theory that I'm going to mention right now? When I was growing up, August, a common thing that a person said about investments was, and especially the stock market, if you don't have the money, if you can't afford to lose what you have or what you're going to invest in, you shouldn't be in the stock market. Shoot a hole in that.
Well, when you're 40 years old and you have time and you have a 401k, etc., there's no problem being in the stock market. It would be nice if most people in the stock market really understood the stock market and the risks they're actually taking. Many people don't understand the risks that they're taking. But as you get closer to retirement, you have to understand you're in something we call, let's say, the red zone. Everybody knows the red zone in football. Well, most people know the red zone in football, which is within the 20-yard line. And within the 20-yard line, what you have is 30 yards. In other words, you have your 20-yard line to the goal, and then you have 10 yards in the end zone. So you have 30 yards to play with there. So think of that as somebody who, let's say when they're 40 years old, they have the whole field ahead of them, and they can run, if they're on offense, any play they want until they get down to that 20-yard line. But when they get down to the 20-yard line, the defense knows they only have 30 yards to play with, so a lot of plays in that playbook go away. So the cardinal rule when you're in the end zone is very simple. Don't give up the ball. And you see it time and time again that teams get down to that red zone and they run a poor play, or it could be an interception, or they fumble. But that's the point. Don't give up the ball in the red zone. In finance, it's the same thing. When you get towards retirement, what you have to do is believe that you're in that red zone, and it's not the time to fumble the ball. It's not the time to give away a bunch of your assets in the stock market. So you have to think differently than when you were 40, if you're now 60, let's say. And that, again, is why I preach tax efficiency, understanding Social Security, how to protect your assets. It doesn't mean you shouldn't be in the market, but if you're going to be in the market, how should I be in the market, and understand your risk?
Kerry, you're in that sort of that red zone that August is talking about. What would you think in considering a question that you would have for August based on what you and I have worked with seniors over the last 2 or 3 years, all the stuff we talked about on radio, all the things we've done with television? What do you think, or how do you think, what would be something that beneficial that August could do to help our seniors?
Well, when I think about the different calls that Kay receives on the Senior Information Helpline, one of the common threads ends up being something about how do we work this so that we don't outlive our money. In other words, I've got Social Security, I've got this much invested here, I've got different things over here, I've got a house here. As you know, we've had many programs about reverse mortgages and different options that are financial, things like that. But they all are tackling basically the same question. How do I make sure that I don't outlive my money? And that's why I think not only we were having this discussion here, that the audience who listens to the Helping Seniors broadcast, both the TV shows, the radio shows, reads the publication, fall into a couple of different categories. One are people who are really either right on the cusp of retiring right at this minute and needing to know what the things are appropriate for them. But then a lot of times we get these calls from adult children who are in their, say, 40s to 60s and saying, look, I want to help mom do this right, or I want to be sure this is okay. So I think the question is still the same. How do you help people not outlive their money?
And that's a real big question, because longevity is now the main risk in retirement. It's how long we're going to live. Longevity controls or causes the effect of inflation to be more than maybe it used to be. When people were living to be maybe in the late 60s, early 70s, inflation was not nearly a concern as people living to their 90s these days. The possibility or likelihood, the longer you live, that the chance that you're going to need long-term care services grows. So there's a lot of different things that are influenced by longevity. So what you have to do is basically structure your assets in such a way that if you look at your assets, the asset mix is such that if the market goes down, or it could go down gently, it could go down dramatically, that your standard of living, which is paying your bills, paying your utilities, buying food, putting fuel in your car, staying in your home, your standard of living are protected with dollars that are not going to be affected by the stock market gyration. Does that mean you shouldn't be in the market? No, you should be in the market with some of your assets, because we also have to deal, again, with inflation and those types of things. And so what I like to look at is two pots of money, cash, and I'm right up front with my philosophy, and some kind of an annuity product, which is a protection product. Lots of different types of annuities, lots of different contracts out there, and that's another pot. And then the third pot is money in the market. I believe that the money in the bank and the money in a protected program should be your standard living protection. Money in the market is your quality of life. Your quality of life is, I want to take vacation, I want to go to a show, I want to go out to eat. But if the market's not so good, I'm not relying on the dollars from a bad market to pay my standard of living bills. If I am in that position and the market goes down, well, what happens is that, of course, that's when you run out of money.
What you're saying, though, August, is that the people that are investing have got to be careful what they're doing, as well as careful in how they're investing, because what they do, depending on the amount they put in your different investment, could either dramatically affect them in a positive or a negative manner.
Well, let's look at it this way. When you're looking at a mix, what you're trying to do is coordinate your assets as to income flow. Most people, when they retire, the assets they have are meant to produce their income for their retirement. So people have to understand several things. What is the risk I'm really taking, number one? Number two, what kind of taxes am I going to pay on these dollars? And there's different taxation based on what you own. If you own money, as an example, let me give you, in fact, let's take a real good example here for a second. Let's say you have a chunk of money in an IRA, okay, which used to be a 401k, but you've rolled it to an IRA for more flexibility. And the market's down 20%, and you need money, and you need a specific amount of money. And let's say you have to take that money out. In general, the IRS does not care how much you've just lost in your IRA account. You need to take the money. So let's say you're down 20%, and now you take that money, and that money is now totally taxable for the income in that year. And maybe let's say your income tax bracket is 20%, just a nice round number to use, which basically means in general you took a 40% hit on that money. I'm going to use a big number here, but it's an easy number to think about. If somebody needed $60,000 and they were in that position, they would have to take out $100,000 from their investment strategy to net $60,000. Well, that's when you run out of money. So you don't want to put yourself in that kind of a position. And if you had 3 buckets to choose from, you'd be much more likely to weather that situation. So what we're talking about here is bear markets and bull markets, and when to use what dollars, and what am I going to pay tax on. Just another quick point. If you have money that's non-qualified money means non-IRA money, non-401k. It's money that, let's say, you saved over the years and you went to one of the wirehouses and you own a portfolio, but you pay tax on that money before you put it into the portfolio. Then when you take those dollars out, they're taxed differently than if you had them in your regular income tax, because those are, if you have a gain, number one, you pay capital gains tax, which is different than income tax. It shows up on your income tax report, but it's not treated the same way in general as your regular income. So right now, as an example, if someone were in the below 15% tax bracket, and of course with proper planning, hopefully a lot of people can get there. Doesn't mean you're living as a pauper, it just means you've done proper planning. But if you're below that 15%, right now capital gains tax would be 0 to you. So these are the things, if we understand how to put those together. So when am I going to take the assets or take income from those assets? How long do I expect it to last? And what type of income tax am I going to pay on those assets becomes a big part of a proper plan.
Well, let me ask a question then. If a person, let's just make an assumption. If we're talking $60,000 and $100,000. If somebody got in a situation where they needed that kind of money, they probably were not a $30,000 a year wage earner. They were earning more. The chances are they'd have a home that's more expensive. At that point, might it be a strategy that they could invoke that would say, I could take a reverse mortgage on my home, and then I could wait till the market returns, and I could repay. I could work towards repaying the mortgage on my home and still get everything I wanted to get and not lose my interest. Well,
it's an interesting concept. I think it would work very well for somebody who might be older, because the amount of a reverse mortgage that you can get is based on the equity in your home, but also on your age.
Right.
The older you are and the more equity you have, the more dollars are available. Understand that you have to be sure of what you want to have happen with that property. All right. An example, somebody has a disabled child that's functional, but you might want to leave that person home based on that reasoning. So you'd have to look at that, understanding your situation, really what you want to have happen with that asset, because it is an asset. And there are other ways you can do it, but yes, I happen to like reverse mortgages for the proper reasons. If you're younger, however, and you're living maybe at a higher level than you should be living based on the assets you saved up, that's another story.
What can you do in a situation like that?
Well, it's difficult. The point is not to get yourself in that situation to begin with. So once you get into a situation, then what do? You take the best option that you possibly could take, and some of them are probably not such good options, but the proper, I guess the answer to it is you don't want to be put in that position. Does it happen? Sure. Let's say it happens to somebody who's working right now, as an example, with a 401k. They could turn around and take, in most cases, a loan from their 401k if they had to. All right, and what they're doing then is they're paying it back to themselves when they repay it. So they're paying an interest, they're paying it back to themselves, and they get that money back, and it's now back in their 401k. But other than that, once you get to retirement, again, I guess I'm going to stress this, you could be in serious trouble if you had that situation, because, and there are people out there that will make the choice, oh yeah, I'll give up that $40,000 between taxes and the market being down because I don't have any other choice, and pay off whatever they had to pay off or whatever the problem was. It could be medical. Hopefully, again, if you've got proper medical planning, you're not going to be in that position, which maybe should be another subject for another radio show, Medicare and Medicaid and things like that.
Oh, I want to talk a little bit about Medicare on the second part of the show. I'm not going to let you off that easy.
All right. All right. So it's a tough question. My answer really is, don't put yourself in that position. Sometimes you put in that position because of poor planning, and I would say in most cases because of poor planning. In some situations, there's just no remedy, and that's the bluntness of it. There is no remedy. You have to do what you have to do. But if you were balanced properly, 3 buckets: cash, protected money, and the market. At least you'd have 3 buckets to try and figure out where the money should come from.
And that leads us back to thinking about the age group that we're talking to. We're talking more to the 50, 60, and 70 market group, but that 20 and 30 and 40-year market group are the ones that are more tempted to go out and buy the Porsche Cayenne or the BMW high series model for $75,000 or $85,000 when they might best afford a Kia or a less expensive car, but they don't want that. They want to drive the more expensive car. They want to go on more expensive vacations. So you got to weigh what you're going to have and what you're going to have to worry about, and then when you have to factor that all into whether or not you put yourself in that position.
I agree 100%. When I have people come into my office for the first planning session, and all of people come in and they'll live in a moderately priced house, and they'll drive a moderately priced car, and then I look at their assets, and invariably, let's say they're in their early 60s, and in many cases they've accumulated a pretty good amount of assets. Then I have other people that come into my office, and they'll have a very expensive home, a very expensive car, which they owe on. They have a mortgage. And they've got credit card debt. So they're at a position in life where they need to figure out how to adjust that. And in reality, I guess the thing that I would say is that any kind of debt that you have going into retirement, maybe other than a mortgage on your home, at least right now, at least the taxes, the interest on a mortgage is deductible. That's the only deduction you're probably going to have at later ages.
Okay, we're getting to Sydney. We're going to have to take our mid-show break, August. Kerry, I want you to think about something that I want you to talk about something on the other side of the break. We'll talk about that during the break. But folks, this is Joe Steckler. We're going to take our mid-show break and stay with us with more from August H. Velten on financial planning, and we're going to talk a little bit about Medicare because it's something you need to know. Stay with us.
WMEL. And this is Kerry Fink with Helping Seniors Radio on the 50,000 watt WMEL AM 1510, and lots of good FM stations all up and down the Space Coast and covering the Treasure Coast. And wow, this thing just covers half of Florida. So thanks for tuning in today. I have the privilege of introducing the second half of our radio program today. I'm here with our president and founder and leader, Joe Steckler, and also our guest. And if you missed the first half of the show, you're going to want to catch the rebroadcast. But we are having an excellent conversation with August Velten, who his organization is August Velten and Associates, and he is an expert financial planner. And we've been talking about all sorts of topics about how you get ready for retirement and what you do, even if you find yourself sort of in a crisis situation with funding, as you are getting into all of that. So among the topics we're going to cover in the second half of the program today, we're going to talk about Social Security. I know a lot of people who are just reaching that decision point where they have to make decisions about how to work with Social Security income. They've worked their whole life. So we're going to get some expert thoughts and ideas about how you approach that. We're also going to talk about Medicare, Medicaid, and some of those topics along the way. Before we get into the heart of that show, or that part of the show, I want to talk about a big event that's coming up on Saturday. So you will want to make sure that you take advantage of this because it's absolutely free. The price is right. It's called Every Day is Veterans Day, and it's put on by the Space Coast Symphony Orchestra, and it's a patriotic musical salute. And if you want to find out more about it, you can go to the Helping Seniors website, Helping Seniors of Brevard, .org, Helping Seniors of Brevard.org, or you can just visit our Facebook page and check the events column there, Helping Seniors of Brevard, and you'll find out the details. It's absolutely free. It's brought to you by One Senior Place and one of our very good partners, Vitas Healthcare. Every day is Veterans Day. It's all about men and women who have worn America's uniform. There's going to be some great music. They're talking about selections including America the Beautiful, Victory at Sea, Hymn to the Fallen, An American Elegy, and marches, of course, from John Philip Sousa. And one of the most fun things that you're going to be able to do while you're out there is visit Kay Kaiser, who is our Helping Seniors Information Specialist. She's going to be manning the Helping Seniors table with lots of good information, but maybe the most intriguing part of it is the beautiful Helping Seniors Win the Classic 1951 Ford Victoria is going to be on site, on location, and it's your chance to see this wonderful car. It's our fundraiser. It's how we keep the lights on and the ability to help seniors. We get 80 to 120 calls per month.
We don't sleep like they do at Motel 6.
No, that's it. We keep the light on.
Keep the light on.
It's 321-473-7770. 321-473-7770. That's that number. And Kay literally talks between 80 and 120 folks a month, helping them with all sorts of wide-ranging issues. So you'll want to be out there. Every day is Veterans Day. It happens Saturday afternoon, 4:30 to 6:30 p.m. I think the festivities actually start earlier, 2:30. I think the car is going to be out there by 2 o'clock. Make sure you get out there, buy a raffle ticket, help support us, help do the good work in this county for that. And we'll look forward to seeing you out there on Saturday. So let's get back to the topic. The question is Social Security, and I guess let me open with a question, and Joe, jump in at any point. But really, if you're approaching that retirement age and you have all these preconceived notions but really no experience to deal with Social Security, this is why you teach a class on the topic. But what do you say to somebody as they walk into that era of their life and they're trying to make good decisions for the rest of their life?
Well, first of all, let me tell you that the classes I teach are actually through an organization called AFES, which is Adult Financial Education Services. Their website is afes.org, and it has to do with the aging population in America and finances and Social Security, etc. So it's basically concerning financial literacy for those 55 and older, let's say. So when people come into my class, let's say, oops, sorry about that. When people come into my class, what I basically say first is congratulations and actually taking time to figure out what might be the best solution for you when it comes to Social Security. And I do talk about things that I talked about in the first half of this show, which was understanding what your assets are supposed to be doing for income into the future, taxation, etc. But during the Social Security class, it really has a lot to do with how to coordinate your other assets with your Social Security benefit. Because during that class, you're talking about when to take Social Security, what's the best thing to do, but it has a lot to do with your other assets. The average American in America today, when they go on Social Security represents approximately 40% of their retirement budget. 60% comes from other sources. Those that have military pensions, they're very lucky because they've got both Social Security and a military pension. And those that have old-fashioned pension plans, which are starting to get scarce out there now, they have their Social Security and their pension. And the main point about those two pieces is that those dollars, that income is guaranteed for as long as they live. So that's kind of the gist of the direction that we take with our planning. And so understanding your Social Security benefits becomes a big factor in how to go forward.
Yeah, but before, I'm going to jump in. Before we even get off this, I'll let you go, August. So many of us, and I've had my Social Security for years, but I never understood before I started taking my Social Security, I never really understood what I could gain or what I could lose. And I certainly never knew until I asked August a question today, folks. And this is something you ought to think about yourself. And you seniors, please tell your friends that if you have made a mistake on taking your Social Security, you can still change it. And that's something that August is going to, I want him to talk about that because the reason we have these shows is for people to gain new information on how to help it. And this is what August can do in terms of Social Security. Go ahead, August.
All right. Well, let's just start there with what Joe just said. There are some rules, and let's talk about a couple of different situations. Let's say, again, I'll use my class. Somebody comes into my class, Social Security class, and they go through the process, and they learn something, and they say, I think I made a mistake because 3 months ago, I started my Social Security benefit. I'm just here in class to kind of confirm that I did the right thing. But guess what? I didn't do the right thing. And according to everything that I see from my personal situation, I should not have taken Social Security. Well, Social Security allows you to go to them and say, let's do a mulligan, like in golf. Let's do a mulligan. I want to start over. And you can actually undo that decision as long as you do it within the first 12 months of signing up for your benefits. You give them back the money that they gave you. However, you don't pay interest on it. You just simply give it back, and it's as if you never did it to begin with. So you have a year to do that. I think another important piece of this, though, is a survivor benefit. And I was talking with Joe about this a while ago, and I'll tell you a quick story. I had a call. I was living up in Maine at the time, and I had grown up in the business in New York. And I got a call from a friend, client, a person, actually it was someone taking care of her, down in Long Island. And they said, Mary's in the hospital, and she had fallen, and she was in her house all by herself almost 11 days, and nobody knew it. And believe it or not, a taxi driver that used to take her to shopping once a week on a Tuesday missed that one day. He came back the next week and said something's got to be wrong. And sure enough, he went in and she was on the floor. So she wound up in the hospital. She survived, and she was deathly afraid that they were going to put her into a nursing home. So we worked that out. We did some stuff. I got a hold of an attorney, and she was able to go home. But the thing that struck me, and maybe this is why I started down this road back then, is that I'm going through her stuff for her to help her say, okay, what are your assets? What do you have? And we pull out this shoebox. And in the shoebox are a stack of uncashed Social Security checks. And I said, Mary, what, why aren't these cash? I mean, I know you could use the money. And she says, well, they're not mine. And my husband's. I said, well, your husband has passed away. These are survivor benefits. And she had no clue that she could be cashing those Social Security checks. And when we added up the Social Security checks, it came out to $86,000. So what I did is we went to Social Security. We said, listen, here's the situation. Misunderstanding. The checks are here. They've never been cashed. And they wrote her a check for $86,000. So understanding what's what and who gets what and how a survivorship benefit works with Social Security is very, very important. So one of the questions that comes up in class, or where I start with, is how do you maximize your Social Security? And I don't mean the longer you wait, the bigger the number, because sometimes that makes sense, especially if somebody's going to be continue working. But maximizing your Social Security means this. It's a program that's available to you, and you should be able to use it to maximize the situation that you're in. Example, let's say you lose a job and you're 62 years old, and you take Social Security because you need to pay your bills. When you take Social Security earlier than your full retirement age, which is called FRA, by the way, full retirement age, it's discounted. And at 62, if you're taking your own benefit, it's going to be discounted 25%. So if you were going to have, again, I use round numbers, $2,000 a month, now you have $1,500 a month. So, every time I make this or tell this story, I think of some of the subcontractors that were up in NASA when some funds dried up and they lost their jobs. Well, they had to go out and they signed up for Social Security. Now, here's the thing. It's not a done deal. And what I mean by that is that, let's say 2 years later, they come up with a decent paying position again. They have to wait till their full retirement age, but then they can stop that Social Security benefit. And from that point on, whatever that benefit was, will get an 8% what's called delayed retirement credit, DRC, delayed retirement credit from their full retirement age, let's say it was 66, to age 70. So it's 8% a year. So they would have 32% more or 32% increase at 70 compared to what they had when they stopped the benefit. And that'll make up for some of the hit that they took because they had to take it early. But the point to this example is that you use the Social Security program to maximize your situation as best you can. It's there for your use. You just want to make sure that you make the correct decision. Example again, some people say, I'm going to take it at 62 because I'm afraid it's not going to be there down the road. And especially if they're working, very poor decision. Number one, they're going to get that discount. And then number two, there's an offset for earnings over about $16,900 or so this year. So for every $2 over $16,900, you lose $1 of the Social Security benefit. So that could be a very expensive choice to make. Would be much better if we had, again, other sources to get some dollars for that. But to make a decision that's going to be extremely costly for the rest of your life, you really should familiarize yourself more with the Social Security rules and regulations. And granted, I understand there's over 1,600 rules and regulations, but the ones that are pertinent in most cases are, if simply followed, you're going to come out much further ahead financially for the rest of your retirement years.
Well, and that's really a good argument why somebody should take a look at the class to get really a sense of where they are and what their situation is, and really just take a minute to get familiar with all that. How does do these classes cost? How does it work?
Periodically. In fact, right now, thank you very much for that, Andre. But right now I have 4 classes coming up. I have a class coming up on the 3rd of October and the 10th of October. The 3rd is a Tuesday, the 10th is a Saturday, and that's going to be at FIT. You can register right online at afes.org, or if you receive the registration in the mail, which you may have, it's a trifold brochure, not really a brochure, but a registration form that tells you how to do that, or you can rip off the invitation, the registration form, and send it in. If you're going to want to go to the classes next week, you probably should call my office at 622-5418.
And I'll interject here,
Sure.
folks. I always tell you to get that pencil and paper out. I should have told you to have your pencil and paper out today, because these are important things that August is talking about. That phone number again is 622-5418. And if you didn't get it, call the radio station here after the show, and it will be here. And so it's important. Kerry, I know you got a couple more questions you want to ask August. Don't let him off hook.
Well, it's funny. We were looking at this to talk about the things. You already touched on this. I think that oftentimes we're not necessarily aware because we're not expert and we haven't studied it the way that somebody like yourself who really gets the ins and outs of this. But I don't know that people understand the taxable ramifications. So they say, well, I'm going to get my check, but then I'm also going to keep working a little bit. Maybe I'm going to work part-time. And I would imagine, how do you talk to people about that topic? Because they're trying to, I guess that's part of the whole question. How do you make the right decisions?
Sure. The 2 things to answer that question. One is that waiting to take your Social Security benefit it's partly due to the fact that you want to create the highest survivor benefit, Social Security benefit that you can, which means that when you have a couple and one spouse passes away, the highest amount of Social Security benefit is what's kept. The lower amount goes away. So that's one thing. The other thing is that Social Security benefits are tax advantage benefits. What do I mean by that? What I mean is that they're not taxed at full income tax rates. This is what happens. And of course, this is another argument for waiting longer, because you'd have higher amounts of dollars that are tax advantaged. Let's just take somebody going to age 70 and a half. Now, everybody should understand that 70 and a half, if you have an IRA 401k, you need to start taking your RMDs, your minimum distributions. When you take those, that is 100% taxable as income tax, for income tax purposes. Whereas Social Security is only partially taxed. So let's just take an example here that I'm in a general sense. let's say that that 40% of your dollars that you're going to take for income are your Social Security benefits, but you waited. All right, so now you have those delayed retirement credits of 8%. You have a bigger number, of which only some of those dollars are taxable. And I'm going to explain in a second how that works out, or how they figure that tax out. But the important point is, if you have these other dollars, the dollars that you've not paid tax on, if your net amount from Social Security after tax, if you've increased that, that means you can take less from your taxable side and therefore pay less taxes, and those assets will then last longer because you're not giving as much back to the government. So how does that taxation work with Social Security? They use something called provisional income formula, and it's pretty simple to explain. You take all your earnings, whether investment earnings, whatever earnings, and you add 1/2 of your Social Security benefit into that. And that comes up with a number. That number is called the provisional income. All right? Provisional income then says, because my provisional income, let's say, is between $25,000 and let's say $40,000, then the most I'm going to include in my taxable income is 50% of my Social Security benefit. So again, if I have a $2,000, and this could be a husband, wife, could be spouse, could be individual. But if 50% of a $2,000 household benefit that's coming in is included, 50% is not taxable. That's $1,000 a month that's not taxable. Well, that makes a huge difference. So understanding, again, the mix of your assets and how they're going to coordinate with your Social Security, and understanding how things are going to be taxed makes a very important or a good place to be when you're understanding that, and when you're planning your own, I call it roadmap in retirement, what you're doing for your roadmap, your financial roadmap in retirement. So again, just some pieces that become very important. If we understand them, we can really build a better roadmap.
But August, a question that comes to mind sitting here listening to you talk about this. Say if a person is 75 years old, they could take your class and get a better job of understanding what you're talking about on the air now, and they might have some questions they could ask their tax preparer, because I'm not sure tax preparers understand all that you're talking about right now.
Well, that's true, and some do, some don't, but in general, I think you're absolutely right. And to give you an example, somebody who's 75 years old still would have the ability, and understanding there's going to be taxation here, would have the ability to do what's called a recategorization of a traditional IRA to a Roth IRA. Well, the difference between a traditional IRA and a Roth IRA is that a traditional IRA, when you've had tax-deferred growth, but when you take the money out for income, it's 100% taxable. Whereas Roth IRAs are tax-free growth and tax-free distribution. Now, just plug that into what I was just talking about before concerning taxation or provisional income. Well, with the provisional income formula for Social Security, Roth dollars are not included in there because they're tax-free. So if you had a $40,000 income stream coming into your home, and because of proper planning, 20,000 of that was Roth dollars. I'm not saying everybody can do this, but if we get ahead of the game, most people can get in this position. But if half of that was Roth, that means only $20,000 would be considered earned income, and then half of your Social Security benefit, again, if it was $2,000 a month, would be $1,000. So you've got $12,000, and $20,000 is $32,000. Well, you could very well, once you've done your taxes, wind up below that first level, and your Social Security benefits may be non-taxable totally. It's just a matter of proper planning. And folks, disclaimer here, I am not a CPA, I'm not a tax attorney. It's just knowledge over the years.
And that what you're really speaking to, and this is maybe why the advantage of gaining this understanding is so important, is you're making a real strong distinction between, quote, dollars coming in versus what I actually have left to spend and use after all the bills, including the tax bill, is paid, right?
Well, something that I say in class fairly early on in the class is this. While you're working, your gross income is a fictitious number. Right, we don't live on our gross income. We live on what we bring home okay, after taxes, and maybe we put in our 401k and we pay for medical. It's what we bring home that we live on. Well, guess what, folks? In retirement, there's no difference. We're going to live on net dollars after taxation, and most of us are going to find that we do not have very many deductions in retirement. So we have to be very efficient on how we plan to use our assets as when the tax man calls.
I know a good way to get tax deductions.
Yes, helping
real
seniors.
good way to get tax deductions. If you come out to the Scott Center on Saturday and buy some, you make a donation, folks, and you get, for a $25 donation, you get a ticket on the car. For a $100 donation, you get 5 tickets. Now that is a way to have a chance to win a car. It also gives you a tax deduction. And if you wanted to donate a lot more, and some people do, I've had people buy over the years, and I've done this. I've had people call me up and say, "I want $1,000 worth of tickets," and it's not common, but I have people that have done that. But generally speaking, it's a person that has a reason for making that type of contribution. But all joking aside, what August is talking about, folks, and I'm talking about as a very senior citizen, it makes a heck of a lot of sense to me, and it should make a lot of sense to Kerry, because he's in that group that's coming up to start worrying about what he's going to do, and August needs to think about it, because he's the guy that's trying to tell all these people in my group and Kerry's group what to do and what not to do. So you got the show. We got about a minute to go.
Well, I think if you were gonna distill it into a nutshell, and somebody was intrigued by what they're hearing, and they're saying, "Wow, these are things that would really benefit me to look into," what would you advocate the next step somebody should do to just become better educated in all this?
Well, this is supposed to be educational, of course. They should talk to somebody that has all the ins and outs when it comes to Social Security.
Make it quick, August. We're almost out of time.
Yeah. Anyway, give Joe a call.
That's right.
Okay.
321-473-7770.
August got out quick. You call Kay at 473-7770, and she'll get you to August. Okay. Bye-bye.